Hey guys, Alpha Seagull here. I'm not particularly known for making balloons content, but for everyone new to the channel, I have a bit of a reputation for using math to break every video game I ever play for fun, and Balloons is no exception. For Elden Ring players who've never heard of this, Balloon Tower Defense 6, or BTD6 for short, is the best tower defense game to ever release, and I really don't think it's close. You have these cute little monkeys throwing darts to pop balloons, and those balloons can have a variety of layers that do interesting things. Each monkey can be upgraded along one of three paths, which sounds pretty simple until you realize how many different monkeys there are and how each upgrade excels at different things and how you can cross-path them, and different monkeys synergize with each other. And look, this game is crack, okay? I've got more hours in this than I do in Elden Ring. Anyways, Balloons just put out its new Rogue Legends DLC, which has a roguelite game mode and it's very fun. There's already been an established meta, the meta was already nerfed, and there's still a whole lot of options to choose from. And like any reasonable person who's given options like this, I made a spreadsheet to compare them. This is normal for my channel. What's also normal for my channel is that after making the spreadsheet, I discovered things that just disregard the current meta entirely to make something new, which led me to finding that the overall strongest artifact in the entire game is none other than Essence of Bloonarius. Yes, really, even after the new patch that just came out. There's a bunch of unique circumstances in Rogue Legends that all line up to make this particular artifact insanely useful. Let's preface this by pointing out that the hardest part of a Legends campaign is the early game, the parts where you have no artifacts and very little to work with for towers, when you have to balance your choices between powerful expensive towers and cheap versatile ones. With an artifact like this, you don't have to make that choice because your cheap versatile towers will be powerful too. And you might be thinking, oh, but Seagull, that's just a 50% boost, how strong could it be? Wrong. It's not a 50% boost, it's just worded in a misleading way. It's got a 1.5 times damage boost to everything, another 1.5 times to Moab damage on top of the first one, and then double Pierce on top of that, which I think a lot of people forget that Pierce is relevant too, especially for good single target towers that don't have much Pierce to begin with. Altogether, your tower can get up to 4.5 times the group Moab damage, which is probably the most important kind of damage to have, especially early game. I charted out the DPS boost of every artifact in the game, and the only artifacts that give higher boosts have a strict condition behind them. Oh, but Seagull, isn't tier 3 a strict condition? No, it's not. It's barely a condition at all. Even the basic type restrictions matter more in this game mode, and they give significantly weaker boosts, probably because Essence of Dreadbloon exists, but still. Even most of the single tower buffs aren't this strong. There's actually a ton of really solid tier 3 towers whose only weakness is they could just use a little more damage. And if you want really high damage towers, there's tier 3s capable of that too. I mean, think about it. What even is the reason for buying a tier 5 tower anyway? We prioritize upgrading over placing more towers because it gives you more damage for the same price. Once you skyrocket the price of upgrading and make tier 3 towers dirt cheap, that stops really being true. Once you quadruple your weak tower's damage output, that becomes even less true. But I get it, you're not convinced. What if I told you there's another easily attainable and strong buff you can combine with this that everyone just kind of forgot about? Fun fact. Alch buff still exists. It's still very accessible and insanely strong. All you need is to get lucky with either a recruited alchemist right at the beginning if you want to be really sweaty about it, which is now easier to do in the new update, or get the homebrew alchemy artifact at any point in the campaign. I tested with a 320 heli pilot and Alch buff nearly triples its group Moab damage just by itself. Keep in mind, all buffs in this game mode stack multiplicatively as far as I know, and the additive ones, like Alch buff, always get put into calculation first. So normally a 320 heli attacking a Moab would hit with 4 darts doing 1 damage each, and then the rotors doing 2 damage for a total of 6 per attack. I know that the rotors hit slightly more often, but we can pretend they don't for simplicity's sake. Alch buff would increase each damage instance by +2 for a total of 16 damage, and then Essence of Bloonarius multiplies each instance by 2.25 for Moabs, which rounds to the nearest integer. I tested that. So now we're looking at 37 damage per attack on a Moab. That is more than enough single target damage for a global range tower, and because of all the Pierce buffs, it's a really good cleanup tower too. An Alch buff Razor Rotors with Essence of Bloonarius is unironically stronger than an Apache Dark Ship by itself. It only has a third of the cost in a normal game, and the price discrepancy is way higher in Rogue Legends. But let's say somehow this still isn't enough damage. Just put down another one. There's nothing stopping you. It's still a cheap tower. Oh, but Seagull, eventually you're gonna hit a damage cap because you can only use tier 3 towers. Okay, 2 problems with this argument. 1, who said you were restricted to tier 3s? Sure, a higher tower won't get the damage boost, but if it's still the strongest option for your setup, there's nothing stopping you from using one anyway, especially if it can give a debuff effect somehow. 2, who said you had to use any tier 5s in the first place? There's your tier 5s right here. The tier 3 super monkeys already compare to tier 5s in terms of damage output, especially Sun Avatar. Once you bring in this artifact, it's not even close anymore. They're just objectively the best use of your money, even if you can afford actual tier 5s. So your damage isn't actually capped at all unless you're pretending you can afford a VTSG in this game mode or something. And just for extra credit, remember how I said the damage rounds to the nearest integer? This means a 1 damage attack getting boosted by 50% actually rounds up to 2 damage. So your weak versatile towers actually get double the damage at the very start when you don't have anything else boosting it, which is great because that's the most important time to have more damage. So, quick recap, when using this artifact, your early game is free, your restrictions are virtually non-existent, you reach endgame level by the time most builds reach mid-game because you only need to mentor your main damage towers to tier 3, and your endgame is stronger than most other endgames. It's the perfect artifact. There's literally nothing in the game that can give you more of what you need when you need it. Okay, so now that we've established just how insanely OP this artifact is, let's go over the optimal way to use it. I'm sure lots of starting heroes can work, but I find the most reliable option to be the alien skin on Etienne. Not only does it start with Helipilot, which can have global range and target all balloon types with just tier 3, but it's got a pretty decent artifact that boosts it. And it's got Dartling, which has a solid tier 3 in middle path, and it's got Ace, which has a solid tier 3 in all paths, which is going to help a lot in the minigames. Speaking of minigames, you're not going to do insanely well on races or mini-bosses early on, I'm not going to lie to you, but it'll be good enough to get a Carmen artifact at least. And you're going to have more than enough damage for the actual boss fights, which are what really matter. Now, least cash and least tiers are just free legendaries as far as this build is concerned, and you'll eventually reach a point where all other minigames are free as well. Once your run starts, you want to prioritize a path that has merchants and campfires. The 2 important towers to get in your party are Alchemist and Super Monkey. You can get away with any cross path on Super Monkey, but having Sun Avatar accessible is the best case scenario. Alchemist absolutely has to have top path accessible. Not to say that the other paths are bad or anything, like middle path has good Moab damage, and bottom path gives you money, so you can get those if you want, but the main one we look for is top path for those sweet damage buffs. The reason we're also looking at merchants is because there's 2 artifacts that gives us exactly what we need, which are Homebrew Alchemist and Divine Intervention. On top of that, these are just really good artifacts in general. They're the 2 best crit-based artifacts in the game in terms of average DPS, and the cross paths are perfect. And on top of this, the attack speed buff of Homebrew Alchemist does in fact affect how quickly it reapplies buffs. You thought the bottom crosspath was great at buffing more than 2 towers? You can pull off nearly full uptime on like 5 different ninja monkeys with the legendary version of this artifact. Anyways, once you've got your Alch and Super Monkey, you want to mentor the Super Monkey up to a Sun Avatar if possible. And your build is finished. Yes, that's literally all you need. I've wanted to try a run where I do a whole campaign with just my starting artifacts to simulate terrible RNG, and I think it's possible to pull off, but I haven't done so yet because I haven't been able to get both Alch and Super Monkey early enough to handle some of the tougher bosses and rounds. It's probably going to be easier after the patch, but we'll see. If you want another alternative for starting hero, you can try Kaiju Pat Fusty. Not only is Pat one of the best heroes in this game mode thanks to also giving you flat buffs, which again, apply before all the multiplicative ones, but they buffed the Swiftest to Business artifact to affect tier 3s and be even stronger than before, making a 302 ninja a really strong camo damage option that pairs really well with Alch buff and Essence of Lunarius. I haven't given enough time to figure out which starting setup is better, but they're both really reliable. Now, even though the setup doesn't rely on Splody Darts or Essence of Dread Balloon, it still synergizes with them. We're already using Super Monkey, which is arguably the best Splody Darts tower, and then pretty much everything synergizes with Dread Balloon, honestly. Now, I've repurposed a tier list to show you which artifacts you should be caring more about for this build. I feel like 90% of it is self-explanatory and most people would come to the same conclusion, but I like to be thorough. One combination that really surprised me was Growing Steady, which I tried very recently. Since the damage buff is additive, it happens before Blunarius, which turns low-tier druids into incredible Moab shredding towers, arguably as good as a Sun Avatar. I might make a whole video about just this artifact, but we'll figure that out for another day. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, do all that algorithm crap,